Harry's back, but can the king really trust him? Can William avoid being dragged into things? Why has Paul Burrell been causing a stir again? And what has Sophie been doing in Canada? We've got quite the royal show for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and on the panel today, it's the two Richards, veteran royal correspondent and the editor-at-large of the Daily Mail, Richard Kay, and the paper's diary editor, Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. Quick reminder that if you want more great royal news and views, there are two things you can do, and they're both very easy. One is to make sure that you subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. Click that subscribe button for free to be notified whenever we put out a new show like Royal Walks, which we put out earlier this week, and that will play straight after this if you've missed that one. We've also put up another exclusive video of Robert Hardman sharing some fascinating facts about the Windsors' relationship with the various US presidents. But the only way to get that link is to sign up to the Palace Confidential newsletter, and we'll send you that. It's free, and there's a QR code on your screen now, which you can scan using your phone's camera. It's that easy. And if you're watching on a phone, we'll put a link to that in the description below. Now, I should say that Rebecca English was due to join us, but she ditched us at the last minute because she got a much better offer. And to be fair, I probably would have done the same, because that offer was to spend the day at an engagement with Catherine, the Princess of Wales. So I think we can forgive her, right? Richard Eden, it has been a busy week for the Walesers. What have they been up to?
Yes, it has. I mean, today Rebecca and Princess Catherine are visiting textile manufacturers in Kent and Suffolk, I think. So travelling around England. And I mean, we sat here talking about William and Catherine's first engagement of the season last week, the joint one at the Natural History Museum.
Yes.
And they've been very busy since then. They've both attended rugby matches at the weekend, different matches, because as we know, they're patrons of different organisations. It was the women's rugby, and Catherine was cheering on England.
Excellent.
And Prince William was cheering on Wales. So they were busy there. And then they've been more engagements since then. It's been a very busy week. We've had William visiting the Women's Institute in Berkshire, which was on the 3rd anniversary of Queen Elizabeth's death.
Yes. And
he was joined, it was quite a surprise, he was joined by Catherine. So that was another fun joint engagement. And William's been pretty busy since then, visiting projects connected with his crusade, really, to end homelessness, and engagements throughout the week. So, yeah. Very busy times. Packed
old royal grid. They call it, don't they, the royal grid that they look at with all their movements around. Now, Richard Kay, we also saw the King and Queen at the Braemar gathering, which is that's a big favourite on the royal calendar, isn't it?
It really is. It's the traditional must for those members of the royal family who are staying with the monarch at Balmoral Castle at this time of year. And the Braemar gathering is a rather quaint, old, traditional Scottish favourite. They play Highland games. I think most people associate it with tossing the caber. So there are lots of big, well-built men holding these enormous telegraph poles and throwing them up into the air.
There are worse things to watch.
There are. And the king had an amused bunch of sightseers with him. Some people familiar from television, for example, the actress Joanna Lumley was sitting alongside him. Normally this weekend, it always coincides with the arrival of the British Prime Minister. And sure enough, Sir Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria were guests at Balmoral, but they did not attend the Braemar gathering. I think for some politicians, being seen at what some people might think of as a rather elitist sporting event, they choose to avoid it. I suspect there's another reason for this. Often you're required to go in mufti, and the king always wears a kilt when he's in Scotland, as we know. He has no qualms about that. But not many prime ministers have similarly donned a kilt to sit alongside.
Have any?
I think going back, obviously Mrs. Thatcher would wear a tartan skirt.
Yeah.
Not quite the same, but I think one prime minister from the 1960s did, Sir Alec Douglas-Home, but he was Scottish.
Yeah, I think Sir Keir's had quite a week of it himself, hasn't he? If he doesn't want to wear a kilt, maybe we should let him off.
Do you remember that wonderful photo of Tony Blair and his wife at the Braemar Games? And unfortunately, his wife, was caught having a massive yawn.
Stifling a yawn.
And it was Yeah, it was quite an embarrassing picture, really. But I think since then, politicians have dreaded being looking bored.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the family were wearing black ties as they are in mourning after the death of Catherine, the Duchess of Kent, and we'll have more on that later in the show. The other big news of the week, of course, is after a day of will they or won't they, Prince Harry arrived at Clarence House for a meeting with King Charles, their first in 19 months. Richard Kay, front page of the Daily Mail. Of course, what can you tell us so far?
Well, details are scant, and what is interesting is that the reason, the meeting was agreed, and clearly there were some rules set down before it happened, and one of those was that Harry had to once zip it and not rush out afterwards and give an interview. Of course, I'm sure Richard will jump in here and say it's early days and there's still time for him to betray any confidences. But so far, and it has to be said, there was a statement put out by both Prince Harry's team and, of course, by Buckingham Palace about what took place, which was they sat down for tea. Both parties have agreed to the same form of words, and there's been nothing different. The question remains is, will Harry observe this omerta, or will he be tempted into saying something? He did respond to a shouted question a little while later on after the meeting. Someone shouted out asked how his father was, and he said he's really well. So there was some positive news too. But the key thing was that the meeting actually took place. As you said, 19 months, it's a very long time. An awful lot of turbulent water has gone under this particular royal bridge.
And do you think that we're at a point where the king can trust Harry to, in your words, zip it?
I'm not sure we've reached that point yet, but I think it's an ice-breaking moment. We'll see. I mean, he clearly wants to trust his son. You've got to remember, he had a very warm relationship with Prince Harry. Of his two sons, he was always closest to Harry, and that's tragically no longer exists, at least not in the way it did. I think because of his cancer treatment, because of everything else that's going on around him, the king would like nothing more than a proper reconciliation with his son. If nothing else, it would allow him to properly meet his two grandchildren living in California, who he's barely seen.
Now, Richard Eden, I know you'll be wanting to have your two penneth, and I don't think anybody will be surprised to know that you've written for Mail Plus today that you think this was the wrong move for King Charles.
Well, look, obviously I can understand a father wanting to meet his son. I mean, who wouldn't? The problem is he's not just a father, he is our head of state, and I think Harry and Meghan are bad for the royal family. And I appreciate Richard's points in his article today about that it's for the benefit of the monarchy in the long term, but respectfully I have to disagree with that, because I think Harry and Meghan are bad news, and we've seen time and time again that they can't be trusted, they exploit their royal connections, and I don't think it's being paranoid to say that they want to be the alternative royal family. They want to replace Prince William and Catherine as the principal royals, and they undermine them. I mean, just look at this week. I mean, this was a week full of engagements, as we mentioned, for William and Catherine, and Harry has been competing with that, and also just doing things like, announcing a donation to a charity and stuff like that.
Well, we'll get on to that.
Undermining, and I think it really is not in the long-term interests of our monarchy.
I don't think, does it really make sense to say that they want to be the principal royals when they made a very, very strong statement about stepping back from royal life?
Well, they didn't want to quit royal life. They did it because they were told to, because they wanted to make money. What they wanted to do ideally was combine making money with carrying out royal duties. And what we've seen this week from Harry is an attempt at that. It's been like a sort of royal week of engagements, with a succession of things. He always comes back, for example, to attend the Well Child Awards.
Well, he's a patron, isn't he?
Yeah, and this year he's combined it with various other engagements. So it has appeared like a sort of royal week.
Interesting.
And so I just think it's dangerous, basically.
So Richard touched on your piece in the Mail today and the significance you think it has for the Windsors. What did you say?
Well, I just think that I accept everything that Richard says, but I think having a split royal family, which is what we have at the moment, with the Prince across the water, is not good for long-term stability. It obviously has echoes of what happened with King George VI and his brother, the Duke of Windsor, who abandoned the throne, as we all know, and who carried out quasi-royal engagements over the next sort of 19 years or so, which thankfully did not impinge too much on the working of the House of Windsor here. But Harry was, and perhaps still is, a popular young man in certain parts of the world. And I think Charles recognises that popularity could be a problem further down the road unless he is somehow corralled within the royal system.
And turns it into a benefit.
It has to be for the benefit of the whole family as a whole.
I think that we can predict that there will be some angry comments about, though there are people who firmly believe that the king should never talk to Harry again. But I think that what you're saying is you can be against what Prince Harry has done, but see the importance of mending those fences for the monarchy as a whole.
I accept that. I think he, as Richard said, he's a twin role. But the other element of this that has me thought, he's a father, he's a monarch, he's also a Christian. And there's a great deal about forgiveness, and bringing Harry back in will be a very noble act, but it would also be a very Christian act.
I totally agree that forgiveness is important, but it must be accompanied by repentance. And we haven't heard anything. So before we had Harry demanding apologies, he literally said this in loads of TV interviews, I want apology for this, for that. That didn't come, so he's kind of settled for not getting that. But there hasn't been any repentance from him at all.
It would be very interesting to know, and thus far we don't, whether Harry actually stood in front of his father and said, "I'm sorry, Papa." I bet he didn't, but it would be interesting to know.
Yeah, there doesn't ever seem to be much conciliatory tone from Harry. There's never a moment where he's like, maybe I shouldn't have said this or done that on that day.
I quite agree, and in fact, there was stuff in the British newspapers at the weekend from Harry's team, in which he was the team were basically saying, well, look, Harry has made this grand gesture, it's on you. Again, the language was all wrong. It was shouty, it was demanding. It again stressed that Harry was in the right and the rest of them were in the wrong. It won't have gone down well, and I suspect it played a part in why Prince William took absolutely no interest in this whatsoever.
It's interesting, isn't it, though, that there does seem to have been this concerted PR push from Harry's side, and we're even seeing, pictures of like the old Harry, smiling pictures. Do you think that this? What do you think of this? Is it deliberate? Is there a strategy at play?
Well, look at Harry this week. I mean, he looks like the cat who's got the cream. Smiling, and he's achieved what he wanted, and it does seem to have been part of this concerted PR drive. I mean, let's think back. We discussed that meeting between the King and Queen's Communications Secretary, Tobin Andre, and Harry and Meghan's newly appointed communications chief, Meredith Maines. She flew over from LA specifically for these meetings. And so it is part of this drive. They know what they want. And I'm afraid to say, I think there's a lot more to come.
It's interesting, you touched on the big cash donation that Harry made this week. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what this was Prince Harry announced that he'd given £1.1 million to BBC Children in Need, and it was particular for projects in Nottingham. It was the scene of Meghan's first public engagement after they announced their engagement, that she met, and it's to do with young people, stopping them getting involved in gangs in a poor area of Nottingham. So very worthwhile project, very generous, but really what people have said to me, really crass to announce the amount. So often over the years you'll hear that the royal family have made a private donation, but they never say how much. To actually announce it just seems, sorry to be cynical, but it's almost like a sort of quite transparent bid for popularity. Do
you agree with that? Is this part of the PR push, Richard?
I agree completely. I thought it was extremely vulgar to specify the amount. It's a huge amount, make no mistake, and it's incredibly generous. But it's taken as read that the royals will be generous with their donations. The King, Prince William, and other members of the royal family have donated to charity for many, many years, but they do it quietly, they do it unobtrusively. The charities are grateful, but the amounts are never spelled out. Harry chose to issue a statement, if you like, about how much he'd given.
I can't help but hark back to the infamous Oprah interview where he talked about how difficult money was, so it's like, can't be that bad.
Well, that's true. I mean, he's got a spare £1.1 million pounds in small change that he can give away to a charity. But, it's not that long ago that he was worried about how he was going to pay for their lavish lifestyle.
Well, it's good that a charity's getting some money anyway. We always like to see that. Now, we've touched on William. No one was expecting William to join any happy reunion, were they?
Not really.
No.
I mean, I think that is going to be an extremely long time coming before the two brothers sit down again. I suspect it's part of Harry's game plan that eventually they will be reconciled, but William shows no interest in it, and I think with very good reason. I mean, Harry betrayed every royal promise that is made within the House of Windsor. You don't talk about family matters. And Harry did all that in his memoir and on television. And I think both William and Catherine felt utterly betrayed by Prince Harry.
Can you see any scenario, Richard Eden, in which William will meet Harry? What would it have to take for him to be trusting again?
Yes, I could, because I think William can be magnanimous as well, like his father, but he needs to see repentance. I think if Harry begs forgiveness and says, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have betrayed our confidences, I shouldn't have traduced your wife and insulted her in my book and repeated things which she wasn't able to answer back, she wasn't able to respond, and if that was a genuine apology, then I think he would forgive him. But I haven't seen any sign of that. I think Harry thinks he did the right thing, and has nothing to apologise for.
It's interesting, isn't it? I wondered if a moment for reconciliation might be the sad occasion of the Duchess of Kent's funeral, but he's not going to be there.
No, apparently not. I mean, that would have seemed like an ideal opportunity. But it's not just William who has reservations about Prince Harry. As we learned from the Paul Burrell book, which the Mail had serialised, when Harry arrived to pay his respects at Balmoral Castle after the death of Queen Elizabeth, he was met with frosty, icy silence from those members of the royal family who were there. They don't trust him, full stop, period. And I suspect that William is not alone, and that the wider royal family would have been uncomfortable about seeing Harry at the Duchess of Kent's funeral.
I should say it's a big deal that Harry has not stayed for that, because obviously you might remember that he happened to be here with Meghan at the time of Queen Elizabeth's death, and so they stayed for her funeral. And the Duchess of Kent's funeral is a big historic event because it's at Westminster Cathedral. It's the first Roman Catholic royal funeral of modern times. The first time a monarch will have been there, and all the royal family will be there. So it will be notable.
And I think it's worth pointing out that the Duchess of Kent was the sole member of the royal family who stood by Harry's mother. He stood by Diana and continued to support her when others fell out with her.
I think it's because Harry's got what he wanted now. He's got that meeting, he's got the headlines, and so he's back to LA. Well, we obviously want to hear what you think about this major development. Was King Charles right to meet Prince Harry? Give your thoughts in our Palace Confidential newsletter poll. You can sign up with the QR code on screen or at the link below. Now, in today's comments, we're going to look at what you've been saying about some of the other shows that we've been putting out. There's a lot of content. We released 2 episodes of Palace Confidential's Authorised, where we speak to people who've written books about the royals, and both just happen to be former royal butlers. First up with Grant Harold, who goes by the Royal Butler on social media. About that show, Mary said, "Great interview, appreciate the one-on-one style. Grant shows that the royals really are a family at heart. It sounds like he had a positive experience working with them." We also interviewed Paul Burrell, former butler to the then Prince Charles and the late Princess Diana, as well as former footman to the late Queen and Duke of Edinburgh.
Now that one stirred up lots of comments about tea and the best way to make it. Lindsay Howard didn't like Paul's advice. The milk goes in the cup before pouring the tea. Lindsay, I can't believe what I'm reading. This goes back to the days when the cups were all fine china. If you poured the boiling water, boiling as it has to be for tea, this would break or smash the china. If you put the milk in first, then the liquid would be a bit cooler. By the way, the tea or tea bag never goes straight into the cup. Wow, this is like somebody, I like firm convictions on tea, even if I don't always agree with them. Now, I'm sure that there will be lots more on that, but if any companies want to sponsor us to give us their tea on the table here, just get in touch. To our other news show, Royal Walks, a reminder that will play straight after this. Now, we received a lot of affection for this one. Thank you so much. Like this from Carol Ann Posey. This was fabulous. I never imagined when I clicked on this that I was in for such a treat. You shared so much information that most people would otherwise never know. Each carriage was grander than the one before, and now we know which carriage is the monarch's favourite. Who would guess a carriage with a camera installed so we could see the same view from the carriage as its royal occupants see? This was a marvellous segment of your always informative Palace Confidential. Thank you. Thank you, Carol Ann. We really loved making it. While Becky in California said, what glorious fun. I'm doubtful I'll ever get to the UK for real, but felt like I was really there with you all today. Thanks for inviting me. You are both so fun. Well, we try. Thanks to Rebecca for being such a fount of information. And of course, thanks also to Sally Goodsir for being such an excellent tour guide. Please do more tours. Girls' Day Out. P.S. Love the story of Rebecca's childhood letter. Please keep those comments coming in. And if you haven't already, do check out some of our other shows. Now, a few weeks ago, we introduced you to Daily Mail columnist Jan Moyer, who reviewed Meghan Markle's wine. She wrote a fascinating piece where she took a closer look at the strategy of Meghan in trying to turn herself into a lifestyle influencer and the contradictions of the As Ever brand. So we asked her to tell us about it.
As we all know, the Duchess of Sussex had a very troubled launch with her lifestyle brand. It was supposed to launch last year. It was going to be called American Riviera. There were all sorts of legal problems with that. So in the end, she launched in spring of this year, calling her new label As Ever, which was meant to suggest that, look, this is what she was going to be doing all along. Even if she'd never met Prince Harry, she was put on this planet to make jam. And sort of since then, we've had the jam, we've had the wine, we've had teas, I think we've had an apricot spread, and we've now got a marmalade. So you have to ask yourself, where is this brand going? And her claim about the whole brand, what makes it different from everything else? It is, and I quote, really authentic. Well, the one criticism that keeps being aimed at Meghan and her brand and the television programme is that it's very far from authentic. You know, people come on the show who are meant to be her best friends and it's clear they've only first met. The jam, we're meant to believe that she plucks every raspberry herself from her garden in Montecito, but now we find out it's made in a factory in Illinois. So it's all a bit sort of, oh, it's not really quite real. Where's it all going? I don't know. The news product is a marmalade, which they promoted on the website with sort of glowing Californian sunsets. But there's nothing special about this marmalade. I mean, I haven't tasted it. I have tasted her jams, and that, believe me, there's nothing special about them. They're perfectly acceptable. They're a little bit runny, definitely a little bit pricey. The only thing that's special about them is the packaging, which she designed herself with her calligraphy that I find menacing. I know that's a bit ridiculous, but I do. I just find it a bit odd and creepy. I mean, if you think about a brand like Goop started with sort of content from Gwyneth Paltrow herself, you know, with recipes and tips and stuff like that. Whereas As Ever started with products, you know, it just went straight into a product launch. So all we can expect now are more and more products. When I heard about the marmalade, it made me think there's a British company called the Single Variety Company. And this is run by a husband and wife team in Bristol. And they make jams and marmalades. And they have just won Marmalade of the Year, which is actually a very serious competition. Dozens and dozens of countries from all over the world enter this. They won with their Amalfi lemon marmalade. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. And I tried it, and it's fantastic. It's a delicious product. You can taste the naturalness in it. This is what I think Meghan wants us to think that she's doing, but she's not doing this with her factory-made jams or whatever. There was a very good interview, a business interview she did recently, not giving away any details about how much of anything she sells. So it's all a mystery, you know. Is she selling a dozen jars of jam? Is she selling 5 million? Nobody knows. She said she hoped her core customer was a teenage girl who wanted to buy into her lifestyle, who kind of admired her and could afford a $9 jar of jam, which she could use afterwards, perhaps to put flowers or a candle in, or use it to put her pencils in from her desk. And you have to think, who does the Duchess of Sussex think she is? I mean, she's not Taylor Swift. It's hard to imagine that Los Angeles or anywhere else is full of young girls who are desperate to buy a jar of jam to get a piece of Meghan. But this is what she believes.
Jan Moyer there, and I want to bring my panel back now. Richard Eden, Jan talks about Meghan's authenticity. And do you wonder if she'd actually spent more time as a working member of the royal family, that she might have built up more cachet for the brand, as it were?
I think one of the problems for Meghan has been that she doesn't stick with things for very long. And, you know, it would have been wonderful if she'd stayed with Prince Harry, you know, as a member of the royal family for a long time, but she didn't. And it's the same with this brand. So she's launched these goods without the hard work that goes into it. So in the case of the King, he wanted to start selling products made at his own farm, and that's how it came, sort of organically grew from that. But in this case, they're right, I just want to do a lifestyle brand. I'll get a factory hundreds of miles away to start making jam for me. And she'll probably get bored of this after a while and move on to the next thing. You know, first she wants to be an actress and she wants to make it big in Hollywood. Then I think she wanted to find herself a rich, prominent husband. But
Richard Eden.
But I think that's essentially the problem, is if you want to be authentic, you do need to stick with something.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously we were just talking about, we know Harry's got a bit of sort of loose change in the sofa, but Meghan must be now sort of thinking this brand's got to start making some serious money.
Well, it has. I mean, they have an extremely expensive lifestyle. We know all about their wraparound security. It's dominated Harry's visits to the UK, not on this particular occasion, but over the last 18 months or so, complaints about not having official protection for him and his family. But it's not just that. I mean, they've got this huge mortgage, they've got this vast house, there are taxes that have to be paid, and a lifestyle that goes with it. Meghan is clearly the breadwinner now within the family, unless Harry is going to re-engage with what made all that money to start with, i.e. peddling royal secrets. And we have to assume that the visit this week, seeing his father, was an acknowledgement that he's not going down that route anymore. So it's over to Meghan to make the cash. Interesting.
Well, speaking of peddling royal secrets, I mentioned our interview with Paul Burrell during the comments there. He is, by his own admission, a divisive figure. He called himself Marmite. And that interview definitely generated a lot of chatter. Now, Richard Kay, he paints a picture of life among the palace as quite wild and occasionally actually quite unsettling.
Yeah, and rather unpleasant. I mean, he was talking about a period, I think, when he joined the royal household in the mid-1970s, and there was rampant homosexual activity. It's no secret that the royal family have, for generations, preferred to have the company of male servants than female. Not exclusively, but there have been, over the years, many male servants, and they've often been homosexual. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But for a young man like Burrell, when he arrived at the palace in 1976, as he writes in his book, he was a virgin, he had no experience of sex, and he was molested, attacked, he has claimed in the pages of the book. And he goes into his own struggle with his sexuality in rather graphic detail, almost too much detail, frankly. But yeah, he does paint a picture of a palace which is more like Sodom and Gomorrah than a royal household.
Indeed, and I was quite floored, Richard Eden, with him talking to me about the late Queen suggesting that he forget his gay feelings and just find a nice girl to marry. I was absolutely blown away. What did you make of that?
It was like a sort of incident from another era, wasn't it?
100%, yeah.
And I think, you know, that was her solution was, look, you want to have children, which clearly he did, then settle down and get married, which I think, you know, was the sort of standard advice at that point. Obviously now you have gay men who have children and they don't need to pretend to be straight and marry women.
Yeah.
But I think it was an example of the Queen trying to sort of look out for his interests.
And I guess based on the context of the way, the mores of the day, and the moralities of the day, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting because times change so quickly that sometimes you look back at something and you think, wow, and you look back at it with the view from today, but it's very different at the time, and attitudes to all sorts of things do change, and sometimes very quickly.
Although this still raises eyebrows, Richard Kay, he also says he told Harry that his father, the king, had referred to him as the spare. What did you make of that?
Well, it was an extraordinary bit in the book, and also an interesting insight into the relationship, if that's the right word, between Prince William and Prince Harry when they were still close, and Burrell, because I remember distinctly when Burrell's first book came out in 2003, and Harry and William issued a statement in which they castigated Burrell for betraying their mother. They used the phrase "a cold and overt betrayal" to describe Paul Burrell's book, and yet, according to Burrell, 14 years later, he's standing in Kensington Palace at the invitation of William and Harry to discuss Princess Diana with them. That was quite a startling revelation to me, and Burrell has more or less recounted what he can remember of the conversation, in which he does talk about what he claims Diana told him, Burrell that is, about what the then Prince Charles's reaction was to the arrival, to the birth of Prince Harry. Quite a thing to say if Harry didn't know this, but it seems inconceivable that Harry had escaped the whole saga of what had been said about his birth over the previous 20-odd years. But nevertheless, according to Burrell, Harry was sort of taken aback by what was allegedly his father's remark.
So what was the remark?
That arriving in the birthing suite at the Lindo wing at St Mary's Hospital.
Newborn Harry.
Newborn Harry. Oh, it's a boy, and he's got red hair. He's got red hair. And then he added the killer line, well, I've got an heir and now a spare, my job is done, basically, that he was saying. Now this story has been embellished and has changed over the years.
Yes, because I think the way Burrell tells it, the quote is, now I can go back to Camilla or something.
I find it hard to believe.
I find it hard to believe that he would have said that, and it's never been put in quite such brutal or blunt terms before.
It just doesn't have the ring of truth about it, does it, as a thing
I think that the thing that I did ask him about was, I was curious as to why he thought it was incumbent upon him to tell Harry this.
Well, my reading of that, although I accept what you say, is that Paul Burrell was saying it on the basis that Harry knew this anyway, and he wasn't actually telling him anything new.
Well, we three could talk about this all day, and I'm sure you will have your views as well. If you want to make up your own mind, do check out Palace Authorised. That's on this channel with Paul Burrell, and we'll look forward to hearing what you've got to say about that. Really, really interesting chat. Now, Richard Eden, there's been so much going on in royal circles. I think some people could be forgiven for missing that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, has been in Canada. What has she been up to?
Yes, I mean, as we know, Sophie and Edward sometimes go on tours, they carry out engagements together, but in this case she's been on her own. She's been in Alberta, Canada, carrying out all sorts of engagements. The one that caught my eye was she's been at the great equestrian event at Spruce Meadows. Wonderful pictures. I know that it's been such a busy royal week, they haven't always appeared in newspapers, but if you look at the royal website, there's some great pictures of her in Canada, and she's had a really busy week of engagement, so I'm sure the Canadians have appreciated seeing her. Very good.
The royals do love a trip to Canada, don't they, Richard Kay?
Very much. I think it's probably the favourite destination outside the United Kingdom.
Don't make Australia jealous.
Don't. Australia's pushing them very close behind. But I mean, there are no rumbles of discontent about the royal family or the monarchy that do continue in Australia. I think they're sort of uncomplaining Canadians. They're always very pleased to see the royal family, who are their royal family too. Charles is the King of Canada. And I think they like being included. And the fact that Sophie is a hard-working, diligent member of the family goes down very well in Canada too.
Indeed, and yeah, she's much loved within the royal family. She was seen actually leaving Clarence House, wasn't she, just before Harry arrived, which has had some tongues wagging with conspiracy theories, but I suppose we could surmise that she was just there to brief the king after the trip.
Almost certainly. I mean, it's standard practice after a member of the royal family goes abroad, when they are, after all, representing the monarch, to go and report back to the monarch. And Charles's visits to London are slightly limited at this time of year. He's usually based in Scotland, but he had to come to London, as we know, on Wednesday to see his son, and he had a meeting of the Privy Council and other engagements, and he slotted in a meeting with Sophie, and I think Sophie would want to have told him how well her trip had gone.
And probably bring him a souvenir from Canada, I suspect.
Yeah, moose head.
Maple syrup. It's got to be maple syrup. Absolutely. Well, normally for our unsung royal hero, we play a fanfare, as you know, but this week it doesn't seem that appropriate, as we're using this section of the show to remember Catherine, Duchess of Kent, who died last week. Richard Kay, do tell us a little bit about it, but first remind us where she fitted into the family.
Okay, so Catherine Kent, the Duchess of Kent, was married to the Duke of Kent, who was the late Queen Elizabeth's first cousin. He was a son of a prince, grandson of a king, so very much core working royal too, still a working royal. Catherine Kent, in fact, chose to step back from royal duty. Maybe some messages here which you might want to jump in on. Some years ago, 2002 from memory, but she was still a very popular family member. She raised 3 children, but hers was a difficult life. She found the business of being royal quite hard to come to terms with over the years. She famously changed faith. She converted from her Anglican faith to become a Roman Catholic late in life, from which she derived a great deal of fulfillment and happiness. And she also had this very interesting, ambivalent attitude towards her royal title. She asked for it to be taken away. Well, it couldn't formally be taken away, but it meant she no longer used HRH, Her Royal Highness, to be addressed. She would ask people to call her Lady Catherine, Mrs. Kent even. She had a spell for 10 years or so where she was teaching in schools, and the kids knew her as Mrs. Kent, or just plain Catherine.
Wow.
And I met her on a number of occasions.
What was she like?
She was a very interesting, modest woman, for whom royalty rested on her gently, if you like. She was, as we already discussed, very close to Diana, Princess of Wales, one of the few who really stuck by Diana after the whole Panorama explosion. And she liked being a mother very much, and a grandmother, but she liked the anonymity that giving up royal duty afforded her.
It's interesting, isn't it? We just keep seeing some of these patterns echoed. Richard Eden, there are inevitably parallels to draw between another Duchess. She married into the family, had some mental health issues and sort of receded. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I found we recorded an episode of Reading the Royals about the Duchess of Kent, and I found it absolutely fascinating learning more about her. But yeah, she suffered terrible mental problems, just as, well, sort of Meghan had alluded to herself. And in Duchess of Kent's case, she eventually withdrew from public life, but in a very quiet way, and with that sense of duty. So she carried on, as Richard says, teaching music, travelling up to Hull twice a week to teach music there. And there was no sense of giving it up to make money somewhere. It was all still very much about public duty, and she stayed with her husband as well. So really interesting person. I'm looking forward to hearing more about her at the funeral as well.
Fascinating woman. Well, we wanted to mark the sad death of Catherine, the Duchess of Kent, by looking back at some fantastic pictures of her extraordinary life. Rest in peace, Your Royal Highness. A reminder that you can subscribe to this channel for more of our great shows like Royal Walks, which you can watch by clicking here. Do hope you enjoy that. Just time to say thanks to my guests, Richards, Kay and Eden, and to you, as always, for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.